Hey guys, tonight we step into a place where time itself feels like it's pressing against your shoulders, heavy with dust and mystery. Imagine the warm desert air wrapping around you, grains of sand crunching softly under your feet as you move closer to something monumental. Massive temple walls rising out of the horizon, etched with carvings that seem to whisper stories even when no one is around to hear them. You can almost feel the weight of centuries hanging over you, as though the stone itself is watching. You probably won't survive this heat without a decent water bottle, but don't worry, you've got me guiding you, and I promise the air gets cooler once we're inside. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The temple doors grounds you push them open and you step into shadows where the sunlight doesn't intrude. The stone feels cool under your fingertips, smooth in some places, rough in others, like the very walls are trying to tell you their story through touch alone. Torches sputter faintly in niches, their flames painting strange moving creatures across the reliefs. These carvings, slender figures with long, elegant limbs, record something far more intimate than war or kingship. Here, among these ancient symbols, you realize you've stumbled into a hidden narrative, the pursuit of rest, dreams, and sleep itself. In ancient Egypt, sleep wasn't just biological necessity, it was a portal. Pharaohs believed their dreams were messages from the gods, a kind of celestial voicemail system. Picture yourself lying on a woven mat, the Nile breeze drifting through an open window, waiting to be visited by the god Bes, protector of dreams and also, strangely enough, the patron of dwarf dancers. Historians still argue whether people actually believed Bes physically stood by their bedside, or if he was more of a comforting metaphor. Either way, a protective little god watching you sleep feels oddly reassuring, right? Like having the world's most magical nightlight. And is the quirky stuff. You might assume that lavender sachets are modern, but Egyptians were ahead of the game. They stuffed pillows with dried herbs, hoping the fragrance would summon sweet dreams. Even stranger, they experimented with concoctions like mixing honey and crushed poppy seeds as a bedtime tonic. Whether it worked or just gave people sugar highs, we'll never know, but the idea of drifting off with honey-sweet breath doesn't sound too bad. As you move deeper into the corridor, your footsteps echo, bouncing around until they sound like whispers. You pass a wall depicting the goddess Hathor, often shown with cow horns curling around a shining sun. She was a bringer of joy, music, and also restful sleep. You can almost hear the pluck of ancient harps and the faint rhythm of drums in the distance. Imagine drifting off not with white noise or a fan, but to the sound of a priestess singing hymns in a courtyard under a star-thick sky. It's not hard to see why people would feel their eyelids droop in such a setting. But Egypt wasn't just about cozy nighttime rituals. They had their debates too. Some texts describe sleep as a rehearsal for death, the body practicing how to rest eternally. Others painted it as a form of temporary rebirth, a nightly reset. Historians still argue whether Egyptians genuinely saw sleep as miniature death, or whether it was just poetic imagery to spice up tomb walls. Either way, it makes you reconsider that moment when your head hits the pillow. Suddenly it feels a little more dramatic. You pause near a faded mural showing a family gathered at dusk. Children lean against their parents as the day cools down. Someone is grinding herbs in a small bowl, someone else is adjusting mats. It's a scene that feels oddly familiar, ancient yet modern. Because even now, thousands of years later, we're still fussing with pillows and searching for the perfect bedtime snack. Except these days, it's more likely a questionable midnight fridge raid than a honey poppy potion. You pass into a smaller chamber where the air smells faintly of dust and something floral, almost like dried lotus petals. This was once a place of ritual sleep, a practice called dream incubation. People would rest in temples, hoping to receive visions that solved problems or answered questions. Imagine booking a hotel room where the concierge promised, "Yes, ma'am, this evening you'll dream the solution to your biggest life dilemma." Tempting, isn't it? Though if my last dream about a talking hamster DJ is anything to go by, maybe not. One quirky tidbit tucked in the papyri tells us that crocodile dung, yes, really, was once part of certain protective ointments. People believed smearing it on could ward off evil spirits at night. Now before you gag, remember they were trying to protect their children. And who among us hasn't tried some weird sleep remedy at 2 a.m.? Okay, maybe not that weird, but melatonin gummies with cartoon bears on the label? Pretty close. You move along, the chamber narrowing, your shoulders brushing cool limestone. Toys flicker, casting long shadows like sleepy phantoms trailing behind you. The silence is soft now, like cotton pressed against your ears. You feel your own breath deepen, slow heavier. The Egyptians didn't have ceiling fans, but they had something better: the hush of the desert night, the steady chorus of insects, and the Nile's endless hush in the background. White noise before Spotify ever existed. As you linger here, a strange sense of kinship settles in. Across all the differences, language, rituals, and yes, their questionable dung-based spa treatments, the need was the same. To rest. To let go. To slip into that other world where gods might whisper, where problems dissolve, where the soul can stretch and breathe. The carvings around you blur into abstraction, shapes melting into each other as though even the stone is drowsy. You find a place to sit back against the wall. Your body feels heavier now, as if the coolness of the temple floor is drawing the heat out of your bones, pulling you towards stillness. You think of Hathor, of Bess, of honey tonics and fragrant pillows. You think of children settling in for sleep, their laughter dimming into snores. You think of the eternal hush behind the temples and shifting stars watching. The world narrows, grows softer. Your breathing slows with the rhythm of a story older than any book. The Egyptians may be long gone, but their obsession with dreams and sleep lingers, echoing into this very moment. You step out of the cool shadows of the Egyptian temple and with a blink, you find yourself somewhere entirely different, bathed in softer air, tinged with the smell of olives and the sea. The night is alive with a quiet buzz, not from insects this time, but from voices floating over courtyards and the strum of a lyre drifting lazily in the distance. The stars above you shimmer like scattered pearls, but below the real glow comes from oil lamps balanced on carved stone columns, their flames flickering in little halos. You're in Greece now, surrounded by philosophers, artists, and people who probably argued more at bedtime than any of us on Twitter. The symposium is in full swing, pot drinking party, pot intellectual flex. Reclining on couches, men draped in linen tunics swirl wine in clay cups, diluted with water to keep things civilized. You can almost hear Socrates raising an eyebrow, challenging some poor soul about the definition of virtue. Historians still argue whether the symposium was truly a place of relaxed social bonding or more of a competitive arena where everyone tried to one-up each other with clever words. Either way, it's not exactly the setting for a quick nap. Imagine trying to sleep while Plato keeps insisting on explaining metaphysics beside you. But here's the funny part. After all the debate and posturing, people did eventually collapse into sleep. The Greeks were surprisingly practical about it too. They built simple wooden or bronze beds, clines, with woven straps stretched across the frame, then topped them with soft wool or straw mattresses. Not exactly memory foam, but better than stone floors. You stretch out on one now, and it creaks beneath you, smelling faintly of olive oil rubbed into the wood. It's humble, but there's comfort in the simplicity. And while modern folks obsess over blackout curtains and white noise machines, the Greeks had their own tricks. One odd tidbit: they sometimes smeared goat fat mixed with herbs on their chests to warm the spirit before sleep. Don't laugh, it was their version of Vicks VapoRub, only much, much greasier. Imagine hugging someone coated in goat lotion. Romantic, right? The night goes deeper and you wander toward the edge of the cottage, past statues gleaming in the lamplight. The marble catches the glow, cold yet almost alive. Someone plucks a few notes on a lyre, the strings vibrating into the air, gentle enough to loosen your shoulders. You can picture yourself drifting off to this lullaby, your body melting into stillness as voices fade into murmurs. For the Greeks, music wasn't just entertainment, it was medicine for the soul. They believed certain modes or harmony could calm the mind or even prepare it for dreaming. It's like choosing between lo-fi beats to study and relax to and dramatic orchestral battle music, only their playlists were carved into philosophy. The air carries the smell of roasted figs and honey cakes, remnants of the feast. You bite into one and sweetness explodes on your tongue, sticky and warm. Not the worst midnight snack, though historians still argue whether honey was more a luxury for the rich or something most people enjoyed regularly. Either way, sugar before bed, some traditions never die. And maybe, just maybe, this was their way of bribing themselves into good dreams. You wander farther, the symposium's chatter dimming as you slip into the streets of Athens. Torches line the pathways, but they sputter more than they shine. Dogs call up in doorways, and somewhere a child cries out in sleep before a motor hushes him back down. You hear the clatter of pottery from a nearby home, where someone is finishing chores even this late. It's a reminder that while philosophers were busy debating virtue and the shape of the soul, regular folks were just trying to make it through the night with a full belly and a roof that didn't leak. And yet, across all classes, dreams mattered. Greeks believed dreams could be divine messages, guiding them through choices or warning them of danger. Temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, even offered a practice similar to Egypt's dream incubation. Pilgrims would sleep in sacred chambers, hoping for dreams that prescribed cures for their ailments. Picture yourself lying on a stone floor in a temple, wrapped in a cloak, praying to wake up with a clear answer to your health problems. Honestly, cheaper than today's medical bills. The night air cools as you wander past olive groves, their leaves whispering like secrets in the wind. The moonlight glints off the sea beyond the waved Shashnik and the shore. The hush is hypnotic, wrapping you in layers of calm. You imagine ancient sailors lying on their decks, staring up at the same stars, rocked gently by the water's cradle. Their lullaby was eternal, the sea itself. There's humor tucked in here, too. One ancient writer complained that his neighbor's donkey brayed so loudly at night that no dream could survive it. It seems no matter the century, someone always had noisy neighbors. Some things never change, though I'll take a donkey over a 2 a.m. car alarm any day. As you lean against a column, listening to the sea and faint lyre music, your own breathing slows. The Greeks didn't see sleep as death rehearsals like the Egyptians did. To them, sleep was the gift of Nyx, the night goddess, and her son Hypnos, gentle and winged, who touched mortals into slumber. His twin brother, Thanatos, death, was always lurking, but the two weren't identical. Sleep was mercy, a reprieve. You feel the brush of wings in the darkness, an image soft and strangely comforting. The symposium behind you grows quieter, voice slurring into drowsy tones. Someone laughs too loudly, then drifts off mid-sentence. You can almost see Hypnos stepping lightly among them, tapping eyelids closed with fingers softer than feathers. And here you are, swept up in the same current, as if carried along by a tide of centuries. The marble under your hand cools, the night deepens, and the arguments of philosophers dissolve into background noise. You let yourself sink into the rhythm of the lure, the sea, and a bit of olive trace. The Greeks may have sought wisdom in endless debate, but in the end they, like you, surrendered to silence. The world around you shifts again, as if the stars have blinked and decided you should wake somewhere else. When your eyes adjust, you find yourself surrounded by towering arches and the faint shimmer of water. The air is thicker here, humid, fragrant with oil and steam, and you realize you're standing near the famous Roman baths. Laughter echoes off the marble, splashing water punctuates the night, and somewhere a flute is being played lazily by a servant, probably wishing he could go home. You smell roasted garlic and wine lingering in the air, proof that Romans didn't exactly practice "don't eat before bed."
You step closer, sandals clicking softly against the mosaic tiles.
The scene unfolds like a grand sleepover, only with more togas and fewer awkward teenage stories. Kniggly klein on bench, women gossip quickly behind veils and steam coals into their like invisible curtains. It's tempting to settle in yourself, letting the warmth soak into your bones. Romans believed these baths weren't just for hygiene, but for health, relaxation, and socializing. In a way, this was their version of winding down before sleep, a mix of spa, gym, and neighborhood cafe. Historians still argue whether the average Roman actually found it restful or whether it was simply another excuse to network, gossip, and plot politics. Eventually, though, everyone had to go home. And that's where Roman nights truly began. Imagine the city streets, lanterns glowing faintly, casting halos on cobblestones. Vendors shutting down their stalls, tossing leftover figs to stray dogs. Guards patrolling in pairs, their sandals crunching against the gravel. You wander these streets now, and though the air is heavy with the scent of wine, there's also something soothing about the rhythm of a city winding down.
Even anxious sleep.
Romans were practical about their beds, though perhaps not luxurious by today's standards. A wealthy citizen might sleep on a wooden frame topped with straw or wool covered in linen sheets. The poor? More often it was a pile of hay or simply a blanket on the floor. You lower yourself onto a replica bed now, hearing the wood creak beneath you, feeling the faint scratch of woven linen.
Not the coziest, but after a long day in the Forum, even this would feel heavenly.
Of course, Romans also had their quirks. One odd tidbit, they sometimes placed small charms or figurines near the bed to ward off nightmares, tiny protective tokens meant to keep evil spirits at bay. Think of it as the ancestor of the dream catcher, though less Instagram-worthy.
And as a remedy,
drinking warm pasca, a diluted vinegar drink, before lying down. Supposedly it calmed the body, though honestly it sounds more like heartburn waiting to happen. As you settle deeper into the Roman night, you notice the city never truly goes silent. Somewhere nearby, a tavern door bangs open and laughter spills into the street. A dog howls at the moon. The Tiber River murmurs softly in the distance, a steady background song. It's not silence, but it's a rhythm, and rhythm has always lulled people into sleep. The same cadence that carried Egyptians with the Nile now hums here in Rome. But there's a debate lingering in these shadows. Did Romans value sleep as something sacred, or did they see it as wasted time? Writers like Seneca mused that sleep was necessary for health, yet soldiers were trained to live on very little. Historians still argue whether the empire encouraged rest or saw it as weakness. After all, when your empire stretches across continents, someone has to stay awake to keep the aqueducts flowing and the legions marching. You turn a corner and stumble upon an insula, one of the towering apartment blocks where ordinary Romans lived. Wooden balconies creak overhead, laundry flutters in the night breeze, and you hear faint snores leaking from open shutters. These buildings were crowded, often noisy, but inside each one, people huddled close, chasing the same elusive rest as emperors in their palaces. A reminder that no matter your station, the body demands sleep. The scent of baked bread still lingers in the air, drifting from a late-night bakery. Romans loved their midnight snacks too, bread dipped in olive oil, perhaps with a sprinkle of salt. You imagine lying in bed with crumbs clinging to your toga, sighing that it was worth it. Some things never change. Humans will always risk a messy pillow for good food. You make your way back toward the baths, where the steam has begun to fade into the cooler night. The marble glistens with droplets, and the crowd has thinned, leaving only echoes behind. The pools reflect the moonlight, turning them into silver mirrors. You kneel beside one, watching ripples disturb the reflection, and you realize how hypnotic water can be. For Romans, this was the transition point, bathing, eating, and then surrendering to Hypnos, the same gentle god the Greeks loved. There's humor in their rituals too. One satirical poem grumbles about husbands snoring so loudly that wives considered moving to separate rooms. The struggle is timeless. Whether in marble villas or modern apartments, snoring remains a marital battlefield. Imagine a Roman matron rolling her eyes, muttering, "If he keeps this up, I'll send him to sleep in the atrium."
Sehr großcooler now, Krete. A cinetorch flickers by the bed's entrance, casting your shadow long across the stone.
You breathe deeper, the warmth of the baths still clinging to your skin, the noise of the city fading into the distance. Rome, in all its glory and chaos, is finally settling into slumber.
And so do you.
You feel yourself sinking into the imagined weight of linen sheets, the faint scratch of straw beneath, the protective presence of tiny charms watching from the nightstand. Outside, the empire dreams of conquest and eternity, but inside the small chamber, it is simply you, the hush of water, and the steady pulse of your own breath.
The empire can wait, for now you rest.
The warmth of Rome's baths and lantern-lit streets begins to dissolve, like steam thinning into the cool night.
You blink and the marble arches waiters down Cloisters whilst racing around you like guardians of silence.
The air smells of beeswax and smoke, faintly bitter from candle flames that gutter in iron sconces. You're in a medieval monastery now, where the stillness is so deep it presses against your ears until you hear your own heartbeat. The world outside is chaos, lords squabbling, peasants toiling, but in here, time slows to the rhythm of chants echoing beneath vaulted ceilings. You move along a corridor paved in uneven stone, the kind that makes you careful with your steps. Arched windows open to a moonlit courtyard, where a well glimmers faintly in the center. The monks have already retired from their late prayers, and the cloister is hushed. Somewhere, though, a faint murmur rises, the Gregorian chant, slow, drawn out, almost like breathing stretched into music. The sound isn't meant to stir your heart like a drumbeat, it's meant to cradle it, to coax it towards stillness. You can feel the pull of sleep in every elongated note. For medieval monks, sleep was structured, almost military in its precision. They woke before dawn to pray, slept in short intervals, and often shared dormitories where rows of straw mattresses lined the walls. Imagine the shuffle of sandals in the dark, the rustle of wool robes, the occasional cough breaking the silence. Not exactly the luxury of private bedrooms, but there's something oddly soothing in the thought of resting shoulder to shoulder, each person breathing in rhythm with the next. Historians still argue whether monks truly slept much at all, or whether the very lack of rest was part of their discipline. Either way, their nights were as much about surrender as they were about sacrifice. You find yourself drawn into the dormitory, its heavy wooden door creaking like an old man stretching. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of hay, damp wool, and smoke that's crept in from the hearth. A few candles flicker at the far end, their flames tiny and determined, guarding against total darkness. The beds are nothing more than rough planks topped with straw-filled sacks, but after a long day of chanting, working fields, and copying manuscripts by hand, even this would feel like heaven. You run your fingers over the coarse wool blanket, scratchy but warm, and you realize comfort is always relative. One curious practice catches your attention. The monks sometimes slept sitting upright, propped against the walls or each other, to avoid the sin of sloth. Imagine trying to catch some Z's while sitting bolt straight, head lolling sideways like a broken marionette. Hardly restful, but they believed it kept them spiritually alert.
And here you are, slouching comfortably, suddenly guilty for every Saturday you slept past noon.
You leave the dormitory, drifting down a hallway where tapestries sway faintly in the draft. The images stitched into them tell stories: saints bathed in halos, demons twisted in grotesque forms, dragons curling their tails around castles. To fall asleep beneath these images must have been an adventure of its own, dreams fueled by both awe and fear. Historians still argue whether such vivid artwork was meant to inspire faith or terrify obedience. Either way, bedtime decor in the Middle Ages was a far cry from minimalistic IKEA prints.
Stepping outside again, you cross into the cloister garden.
Moonlight silvers the herbs planted neatly in rows: sage, rosemary, lavender. Monks believed these plants had protective powers and could ease restless minds. Lavender in particular was sprinkled onto beds or burned as incense to coax drowsiness. You bend to brush the leaves and the scent rises instantly, sharp, floral, grounding. Funny how this detail survived 1,000 years. People still spritz lavender on pillows today, hoping for gentler dreams. In the corner of the garden, a monk tends to the coals of a brazier, his hood casting shadows over his face. He hums softly, a sound that merges with the night, neither intrusive nor sharp, just part of the atmosphere. You watch him stir the embers until they glow like tired eyes, then you wander on, the world around you softening with every step. Sleep wasn't always gentle in the Middle Ages. People feared the night, for it belonged not just to rest but to spirits, witches, and demons said to wander in darkness. Tales of the mare, a spirit who sat on chests and caused nightmares, haunted villagers and monks alike. You imagine waking in a cold stone cell, feeling pressure on your chest, convinced some invisible creature is crouched there. A terrifying thought, though in modern terms we'd call it sleep paralysis. And yet, despite the fear, they returned to their beds night after night, trusting that prayers or a sprig of blessed herbs would keep the monsters away.
You make your way toward the chapel, where one final candle burns before a carved crucifix.
The wooden figure gazes down, serene, as though offering benediction not just for life but for dreams. You kneel, not out of duty but out of the pull of the moment. The candlelight wavers, gold spilling across stone like liquid, shadows stretching as though they too are weary.
There is a tenderness here hidden beneath the austerity.
Monks lived lives of discipline, but they also cherished small comforts. Records mention cups of warmed milk mixed with honey before bed, a medieval lullaby in liquid form. You sip it now, tasting the sweetness, the faint edge of smoke from the hearth, and you sigh. For all their strictness, they knew the value of easing the body into stillness. As the night deepens, the chants fade, the candles dim, and the silence folds itself around you like a woolen cloak. The cloister walls seem less heavy now, more like arms encircling you. You stretch out on a simple straw mattress, the scent of lavender still lingering in your hair, and listen to the rhythm of breath from unseen companions. The monastery holds you steady, as if promising, the world outside can rage, but within these walls there is rest. The cloister fades behind you, the smell of lavender and beeswax dissolving into the sharp bite of smoke and wood. When you open your eyes again, you're sitting beside a wide stone hearth, the kind that dominates an entire cottage wall. The flames snap and curl, throwing sparks that dance like mischievous fireflies before they vanish into the black chimney throat. Around you, weary travelers pull their cloaks tighter, boots drying by the fire, voices low but steady.
It's a pilgrim's night, the sort of gathering where the John pauses and the stories begin. The air is thick with scents, smoke, damp wool, roasted onions, and the faint sweetness of cider. Shadows leap across rough-hewn beams overhead, and every creak of the wood feels alive, like the house itself is listening. You shift on a bench padded with little more than sheepskin, the seat lumpy yet surprisingly warm. Your body relaxes as you let the fire's heat seep into your bones. This is no grand temple or marble villa. It's rustic, raw, and deeply human. Pilgrims in the Middle Ages weren't just wandering for fun. They trudged for faith, penance, or sometimes just the hope of finding a miracle cure. Imagine walking for weeks across muddy roads, sleeping in barns or fields, and finally stumbling into a hall like this. No feather beds, but warmth, bread, and company. That was luxury. Historians still argue whether most pilgrims traveled purely from devotion or whether it was also a form of medieval gap-year adventure. Either way, nights like this were their reward and maybe the only time they felt safe enough to truly close their eyes. You glance at the faces around the hearth. One man cradles a wooden cup, steam curling from a broth so thin you can see the bottom. A woman pulls her shawl tighter as she hums a lullaby, her voice weaving through the crackle of the fire. A boy leans against her, eyelids heavy, his head sliding down her arm. You watch as the entire group begins to soften, stories lulling into murmurs, bodies slumping against benches and walls. But before sleep comes, there are tales. Always tales. A bearded pilgrim clears his throat, and the others lean closer. He spins a story about saints who crossed mountains barefoot, about relics glowing with divine light, about demons frightened away by a single whispered prayer. You realize these stories aren't just for entertainment. They're lullabies for grown men and women, ways to soothe the fear of wolves outside or the memory of bandits on the road. The fire flickers, his words rise and fall, and suddenly the room feels like one great cradle rocking everyone toward rest. The quirky details of the routine slip through. Some pilgrims believed that tying a scallop shell, a symbol of the Camino de Santiago, to their clothing would not only mark them as holy travelers, but also protect them from nightmares. Others carried tiny pouches of dried rosemary or sage, claiming the herbs chased away evil dreams. It's not far from clutching a teddy bear if you think about it, just scratchier and a lot smellier. And then there's the food. The host, a stout woman with flour dusting her hands, passes around hunks of coarse bread. You tear a piece and taste the sour tang, the chewy crust scraping pleasantly against your teeth. Someone ladles a stew of cabbage and barley into wooden bowls, simple but hearty. Eating together before sleep isn't just survival, it's ritual. It fills bellies, quiets nerves, and reminds everyone they're not alone. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the shutters. The pilgrims glance at each other, some making the sign of the cross, others muttering charms. Night carried dangers then, both real and imagined. Wolves prowled forests, thieves stalked roads, and the supernatural was always lurking just beyond the circle of firelight. Historians still argue whether these fears were exaggerated by churchmen to keep people pious, or whether peasants truly believed the woods teemed with creatures of nightmare. But sitting here, listening to the wind claw at the walls, you can't blame them for clutching their charms a little tighter. Gradually, the stories fade. Some lie on straw mats spread around the fire, others slump against the hearthstones themselves. You follow their example, stretching out on a mat that smells faintly of damp earth and sheep. The fire crackles a lullaby, smoke drifting upward like a slow exhale. Women snore softly, deep, steady, oddly comforting. A nasal pilgrim murmurs a final prayer, words blurring into the silence. It's not glamorous, but there's a peace in this communal sleep. You feel yourself surrendering to the rhythm of it, the sighs, the creaks, the steady pulse of fire.
Dreams come easier when you're wrapped in the presence of others, when the darkness outside can't quite break through. One last thought tugs at you before you drift, the idea that across centuries, humans have always needed this: stories, food, warmth, and a place to lay their head. Whether in stone temples, marble villas, cloistered monasteries, or pilgrim halls, the ritual of preparing for sleep remains constant. You close your eyes, listening to the wind fade into background hum, and the hearth's glow presses gently against your eyelids like dawn arriving early. The warmth of the pilgrim's hearth lingers in your chest, but when you open your eyes again, the air feels entirely different, lighter, perfumed, humming with energy. You're no longer in a smoky hall filled with road-weary travelers. Instead, velvet curtains sway faintly in candlelight, tapestries shimmer with gold thread, and somewhere nearby, the pluck of a lute drifts through the air. You stepped into the Renaissance, a world where nichts glittert with music, secrets, and shadows. The room you find yourself in is a salon, its ceiling painted with mythological scenes, gods reclining on clouds, cherubs chasing each other with bows. The air smells of beeswax and spiced wine, of citrus peel simmering in mulled drinks. Guests lounge on cushioned benches, their gowns rustling like whispers, their collars so wide and starched you wonder how anyone could rest in them. You can almost hear the conversations. Debates about art, philosophy, and whether Michelangelo really did lie on his back the whole time he painted the Sistine Chapel. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were purely for high-minded discourse or mostly excuses to show off expensive outfits and flirt under candlelight. Honestly, probably both. Your eyes wander to a corner where musicians play lute, viol, and a soft tambourine, weaving together harmonies that wrap around you like silk. The notes seem designed to lull the restless into calm, though a few guests fight drowsiness, their wine-glazed eyes fluttering. You imagine what it must be like to fall asleep in such a place, a lullaby not from mothers or monks but from art itself, as if beauty were enough to rock the mind toward dreams. Renaissance beds were far grander than the straw mats of pilgrims or the rough frames of monks. Here, the wealthy reclined on carved wooden four-posters draped with heavy curtains, both to block drafts and to add an air of theater to sleep. You draw one aside, running your fingers over embroidered fabric that feels thick and smooth, almost like armor against the cold. Inside, the mattress is stuffed with feathers, soft enough to swallow you whole. You sink down and for a moment you feel like royalty, even if the bed creaks in protest. Of course, not everyone had such luxury. Common folk still dozed on straw, their nights filled with the sounds of neighbors and livestock. But even the simplest home carried traces of the era's fascination with dreams. Herbal sachets were common, filled with rosemary, thyme, or lavender to ward off nightmares. A quirky tidbit: some households tucked slices of raw onion beneath their pillows, convinced it would protect against illness and bad spirits. Imagine drifting off with onion fumes stinging your nose, effective maybe, but hardly romantic. The salon grows quieter as the evening deepens. Candles sputter, dripping wax down iron holders, and voices soften into murmurs. A woman in emerald velvet yawns discreetly behind a jeweled hand, while her companion launches into yet another tale about Florentine politics. You realize that even in centuries of brilliance, boredom still existed, and that boredom, more often than not, is the prelude to sleep. You step outside, into a courtyard where moonlight spills across marble fountains. The water sparkles, cool and clear, a contrast to the heady warmth indoors. The night air is fragrant with orange blossoms, their scent sharp yet sweet. Somewhere an owl hoots, its sound bouncing between stone walls. You imagine artists and scholars wandering here, searching for inspiration but also for quiet, a place to lay aside heavy thoughts and simply rest. But the Renaissance also had its darker edges.
sleep was not always safe. Night watchmen patrolled cities to keep order, warning of fires, thieves, or drunken brawls. Fear of the plague lingered in every household, and many believed foul air at night carried sickness. Windows were shut tight, herbs burned to purify rooms, and prayers whispered before bed. Historians still argue whether these precautions worked at all, but they reveal something familiar, that instinctive human urge to protect the fragile hours when we are most vulnerable. You pass a workshop lit faintly by oil lamps. Brushes are scattered on the table, half-finished canvases leaning against the walls. The smell of linseed oil and pigment hangs in the air. Even artists with their minds ablaze needed rest. Leonardo da Vinci supposedly practiced polyphasic sleep, napping in short bursts throughout the day and night to maximize creativity. Whether he truly did this or it's just legend, scholars still argue. But you can picture him, head slumped on sketches of flying machines, drooling slightly on a masterpiece. Even geniuses can't outwit fatigue forever. The music inside fades to silence, the salon emptying as guests retreat to their chambers. You wander back through velvet corridors, each step sinking into rugs patterned with flowers and vines. At the end, a bedchamber glows with the last of the candles. The fire is low in the hearth, glowing like a heartbeat. You slip behind the heavy curtains of the four-poster bed again, the world outside muted instantly. It's like closing a tighter curtain. Suddenly, you're alone in your own private stage of dreams. As you lie down, the feather mattress enfolds you, cool linen pressing against your skin. The scents of herbs and smoke cling faintly to the air. You think of the onion trick, of Leonardo's odd napping schedule, of velvet gowns and candlelit salons. The Renaissance was an age of brilliance, but beneath all the art and ambition, the need was the same: to rest, to dream, to surrender to the night. Genres heavier, as if the lutest note still hums softly in your bones. The world narrows to warmth, breath, and the faint rustle of curtains in the draught. Outside the fountain's murmur, inside silence deepens. For a moment you feel suspended between past and present, between wakefulness and sleep. Caught in the very dream the Renaissance promised, that beauty in the end could carry you gently into the dark. The velvet curtains of the Renaissance dissolve into mist, and when it clears you find yourself standing on planks that sway gently beneath your feet. The air is salted, damp and bracing, carrying the sharp tang of the open sea. Above you the sky stretches wide, scattered with constellations that glitter like polished coins tossed across velvet. The creak of rigging and the slap of waves against would form a rhythm steady enough to lull even the most restless soul. You are aboard a sailing ship at night, moving across waters that seem endless, beneath starlit skies that have guided travelers for centuries. Sailors bustle quietly, their boots thudding softly on deck, but the mood is subdued, voices low, lanterns swinging gently, ropes creaking like tired sighs. You lean on the rail, peering into the darkness, and for a moment you feel the ship itself breathing, inhaling with the swells, exhaling with each dip. It's hypnotic, this rocking motion, as if the ocean conspires to cradle you into sleep. Navigation in this era was an art of patience and starlight. Mariners traced their routes by constellations like Orion and Ursa Major, using simple tools such as the astrolabe and the cross staff. A mainstream fact, Christopher Columbus in 1492 relied heavily on the North Star to maintain course across the Atlantic. But out here in the vastness, you can't help noticing how uncertain it all must have felt. Stars shift with the seasons, clouds obscure the sky, and one wrong reading could send an entire ship drifting for weeks. Historians still argue whether Columbus truly understood the accuracy of his navigation or if sheer luck played the larger role. Either way, the sight of the North Star glowing steadily above feels like a promise that you won't be lost tonight. The ship rocks again, and you hear a sailor humming low, almost tuneless but soothing. Soon another voice joins, then another, until a half-song floats over the deck, part sea shanty, part lullaby. These songs weren't just for passing time, they set rhythm for pulling ropes and hauling sails. A quirky tidbit is that some sailors believed whistling on deck could summon storms, unless you were whistling to keep rhythm while working, in which case it was forgiven. Imagine being scolded mid-song, "Stop or you'll wake Poseidon." That's pressure you don't need before bedtime. You follow the sound of the humming down toward the forecastle, where hammocks sway like cocoons strung from beams. Each sailor has a narrow strip of canvas to cradle his weary body, the sway of the ship turning every bunk into a rocking cradle. The air down here is thick with sweat, salt, and tar, hardly pleasant, but the rhythmic sway must be irresistible once exhaustion sets in. You notice a few sailors already snoring loudly, undisturbed by rats scuttling in corners or by the occasional drip of seawater leaking through timbers. Sleep after a day of hauling ropes is non-negotiable.
You klimt back onto deck, säcking fresh air.
The stars seem brighter now, a scattered map you could lose yourself in. Somewhere across these same waters, Polynesian navigators once read the waves, winds, and bird flights with astonishing precision. They could sense islands hundreds of miles away simply by watching cloud formations and feeling the current against their canoes. Scholars still argue whether Europeans learned techniques from them or stumbled through on their own. Either way, it's humbling. Humans with no GPS, trusting the pulse of the earth itself to guide them. Your feet lead you toward the stern, where the captain's quarters glow with faint lamplight. You peer through the window, a desk cluttered with charts, compasses, and half-drunk cups of spiced rum. Even captains had to surrender to rest, though often fitfully, ears tuned for storms or mutiny. You picture him collapsing into a bunk after midnight watch, boots still on, only to be woken moments later by the cry of "sail on the horizon." The Renaissance version of your phone buzzing at 3 a.m. Some things never change. A sudden spray of seawater cools your face, startling but refreshing. The ship tips slightly, but steadies. The ocean, restless and eternal, surrounds you with its own lullaby, the shush of waves, the occasional groan of timbers, the flap of sails in the breeze.
You rest your arms on the rail again and let the heat sap into you. Every sound, every motion becomes part of a gentle insistence. Let go, drift, trust the currents. Sleep at sea, though, always carried danger. A storm could rise without warning, tearing sails and smashing masts. Pirates lurked in many waters, ready to board under cover of darkness. And beneath the waves, the unknown creatures sailors swore were real, like krakens with tentacles wide enough to drag whole ships under. Whether these were embellishments born of boredom or hallucinations from scurvy, historians still argue. That you can almost sympathize in the dark silence of an endless sea, the mind invents monsters more vivid than reality. Yet tonight the waiters stay calm. The lanterns glow, the stars well overhead, and the rocking remains steady like the heartbeat of the earth itself. You lower yourself onto a coil of rope, rough beneath you but surprisingly supportive. Closing your eyes, you listen to the lull of the waves, to the sailors' half-asleep murmurs, to the creak and groan of the ship, sounds that together form a cradle song older than any written music. And as you lean back, the cool wind brushing your skin, you realize that this moment isn't just about ships or history. It's about surrender. Sailors had to surrender to forces larger than themselves, currents, winds, stars. And in a way, so do you. Each time you close your eyes, you let go of control, trusting that the night will carry you safely until morning. Your breath slows, matching the rhythm of the sea. The deck rocks gently, the ropes shift, and the stars above seem to draw closer, like watchful guardians. You drift between wakefulness and sleep, cradled in a hammock of time itself, sailing through a night that has no edges. The creaking timbers of the ship fade into stillness, and when you open your eyes, the world has changed again. The salt air has softened into something sweeter, touched with jasmine and roses. The constant rocking of the sea is gone, replaced by the hush of fountains trickling in the dusk. You find yourself in an Ottoman garden, sprawling and lush, where the twilight lingers like honey over marble paths and flowering vines. Lanterns hang from branches, their glass panes tinted blue and green, scattering soft halos across the stone. You follow the glow into a courtyard where the air feels cooler, shaded by cypress trees. The faint sound of a knife flute drifts from somewhere unseen, low and brazy, like a whisper guiding you deeper. It's the kind of music that seems designed not to wake you up, but to smooth the edges of your thoughts until they blur and soften. A mainstream fact: Ottoman sultans were famous for their gardens, designed not only for beauty but also for serenity. These weren't just places to admire tulips or roses, they were stages for diplomacy, evening strolls, and quiet reflection. Some even believed certain flowers had protective powers, guarding against nightmares. Tulips, for example, became a symbol of abundance and divine order, and their popularity was so intense that in the 18th century the empire experienced tulip mania, when a single bulb could cost as much as a fine horse. Historians still argue whether this obsession was harmless luxury or reckless excess, but one thing's clear: falling asleep surrounded by tulips sounds a lot better than drifting off with an onion under your pillow. You step deeper into the garden and a faint mist rises from a fountain carved with arabesque patterns. The water splashes in a rhythm so delicate you could almost mistake it for breathing. Marble benches line the pool and you lower yourself onto one, the stone cool even in the warmth of evening. The scent of roses floats past again, stronger now, mingling with the faint spice of cardamom drifting from a tray of coffee cups abandoned nearby. You imagine the conversations that might have unfolded here, poets reciting verses, scholars debating astronomy, or nobles whispering plans. But now the only voice is the fountain's, steady and calm. The palace behind you hums with quiet activity. Shadows move along the colonnades, attendants carrying trays of sherbet or fresh fruit. A pair of musicians tune their instruments beneath an arbor, the plucked strings resonating faintly in the air. You notice a garden bed nearby filled with night-blooming jasmine, its tiny white flowers glowing faintly in the twilight. A quirky tidbit: some believed jasmine's fragrance could act as a sedative, slowing the heart and easing anxious thoughts. You lean closer, inhale deeply, and feel your chest loosen as though the flower has reached in and untied a knot. A cool breeze passes, carrying with it the rustle of leaves and the faint echo of prayers from a distant mosque. It's a reminder that even in grandeur, nights were marked by rhythms of devotion and discipline. Many Ottoman households observed strict bedtime rituals, washing feet, reciting protective verses, arranging bedding neatly on the floor mats. For nobles, this might involve silk sheets and feather cushions, while commoners slept on woven kilims rolled out each night. The difference in material didn't change the ritual. Preparation was as important as rest itself. Historians still argue whether these nightly customs reflected genuine spirituality or were simply habits passed through generations. But either way, you sense the comfort of routine, the way it signals to the body, it is time to let go. You rise from the marble bench and wander toward a shaded pavilion. Its wooden latticework filters the lamplight into delicate patterns across the floor, shapes that look like stars scattered on earth. A low divan is covered in cushions, each embroidered with golden thread, inviting you to recline. You settle among them, sinking into softness. The sound of the ney flute swells faintly, blending with the fountains, with the whisper of leaves, with the quiet pulse of your own heartbeat. As you rest there, your mind drifts to tales that must have circled through these gardens at night, stories of jinn hidden in shadows, spirits said to twist dreams into visions.
Some swore that sleeping outdoors made one vulnerable to their tricks, while others believed the open air purified the mind. You half expect a flicker of movement at the corner of your eye, some shimmering phantom among the lanterns. But the only thing stirring is the jasmine, bending slightly in the breeze. Perhaps the jinn, if they are real, prefer to leave you alone tonight. The musicians begin to play more softly, their tune falling into minor notes that seem to stretch and sigh like a tired body. One pluck, one sigh, one ripple of water. The garden itself becomes an orchestra of calm. You feel your breath sinking with the rhythm, slow, unhurried, the kind of breathing that comes just before sleep.
Still, you can't resist one small smile.
Imagine the poor palace guards, tasked with staying awake while everyone else drifted into slumber among these cushions and flowers. Trying to fight sleep in such a setting must have been torture, worse than any long philosophy lecture in Renaissance salons. And unlike sailors rocking in hammocks, guards had no lull of the sea to blame their drowsiness on, only the hypnotic beauty of the garden itself. Your eyelids grow heavier as the night deepens. The fountains sparkle faintly under the lantern light, the jasmine fragrance clings to the air, and the world narrows to soft patterns and gentler sounds. The garden, designed for serenity centuries ago, does its work flawlessly even now. You recline deeper into the cushions, feeling them rise slightly at the edges, holding you in place as if the garden itself wants to cradle you. Breath by breath, the boundaries between fountain, music, and heartbeat dissolve. You're no longer an observer in this autumn night, you're part of it, woven into the tapestry of shadows and blossoms, lanterns and silence. And in that moment, you finally understand what the sultans sought when they built these gardens, not just beauty, but peace deep enough to carry the mind gently into dreams. The perfume of jasmine and the trickle of fountains fade into dust and wind. You blink, and now the air feels dry, filled with a tang of spice and the faint musk of beasts of burden. Lanterns bob ahead of you like will-o'-the-wisps, swaying with each step of camels and traders. You're walking the Silk Road at night, that vast ribbon of trade stretching across deserts and mountains, carrying not just goods, but stories, beliefs, and secrets. The ground beneath your sandals crunches with sand and gravel. Every step kicks up a faint shimmer of dust that glows in the lantern light. Behind you, a line of pack animals sways under their burdens, bales of silk, bundles of herbs, and jars of strange powders. Their bells chime softly, a metallic lullaby blending with the faint rustle of fabric. The air is thick with the scent of cinnamon, clove, and dried figs, mingling into something sweet but sharp enough to keep you awake, well, almost awake. The rhythm of the caravan has a soporific quality, the steady plod, plod, plod of hooves syncing with your heartbeat until your eyelids feel heavy. A mainstream fact, the Silk Road was less a single path and more a network of trade routes connecting China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Silk, of course, was prized, but it wasn't the only treasure. Paper, gunpowder, porcelain, and even ideas, Buddhism, Islam, and mathematics, traveled these routes. You can almost picture a merchant slipping philosophical arguments between bolts of fabric, like smuggling bedtime stories across continents. Historians still argue whether the route's importance has been romanticized in modern times, but standing here among lanterns swaying and camels grumbling, it's hard to deny the dreamlike power of the place. One quirky tidbit, travelers often tucked bits of rhubarb into their packs, convinced it could prevent the dreaded stomach complaints brought on by foreign foods. Imagine chewing on bitter rhubarb root under the stars while everyone else nibbled dried apricots. It's a miracle anyone managed to sleep at all. Yet here you are, surrounded by sacks of saffron and anise, and you can't help but think, the world's first aromatherapy session was probably just a caravan taking a break. The caravan halts for the night at a roadside khan, a kind of inn for weary travelers. The structure is simple, stone walls enclosing a courtyard where animals are tethered and fires are kindled. Merchants spread rugs across the ground, unloading their wares carefully, as though protecting not just goods but also the stories stitched into them. The stars overhead burn brilliantly, unobscured by city smoke, and for a moment the Khan feels like an island of warmth in an ocean of night. Inside the walls, voices rise and fall in a dozen languages. Persian merchants haggle with Chinese traders, while Central Asian nomads swap horse stories with Arabs. You sit near the fire, the warmth kissing your cheeks, the scent of roasted lamb mingling with cardamom tea.
Flames crackle, sparks leap, and a storyteller begins to recite.
His words are like woven silk, carrying images of distant mountains, magical birds, and kingdoms ruled by just kings. You don't understand every language, but the tone is universal, a bedtime story for grown-ups who will ride for weeks but tonight, just tonight, need to rest. The Khan's sleeping quarters are humble, thin mats rolled out on stone floors, with travelers packed shoulder to shoulder. You wander among them, listening to snores that form a strange chorus, accompanied by the occasional grunt of a camel outside. A few travelers sleep with their purses packed beneath their heads, too wary of theft to fully relax. Sleep here is precious but fragile, a commodity traded like silk or spices. You notice one man muttering prayers under his breath as he drifts off, while another clutches a talisman carved from bone. Historians still argue whether talismans were believed to genuinely ward off evil or simply comfort the weary, but you can feel the way objects, rituals, and beliefs stitch themselves into nightly rest.
You step outside again, drawn to the desert air.
The sand is cool now, almost cold, and crunches softly underfoot. Overhead, the Milky Way stretches like spilled sugar across black velvet. It's easy to see how ancient travelers relied on these stars to orient themselves, marking familiar patterns to keep fear at bay. But it's also easy to see how myths were born here, shapes in the constellations turning into dragons, heroes, and lovers. In the silence of the desert, your own thoughts begin to feel larger, more mythic, until they too start to blur into dream.
The animals outside shuffle restlessly, bells clinking.
You rest your hand on the flank of a camel, feeling the warmth of its body radiate through the night air. Its steady breathing mirrors your own, slow and deep, grounding you. The caravan master walks past, his face lit by lantern glow, and nods at you. For him, this rhythm, walk, rest, dream, wake, is endless. For you, it's a reminder that no matter how far humans travel, the need for rest follows, relentless as a shadow. Another breeze stirs, carrying the mingled scents of spices and wood smoke. You close your eyes, listening to the chorus of snores, the faint hiss of sand shifting in the wind, the far-off call of some desert bird. Each sound layers over the other, creating a quilt of nighttime comfort. The Silk Road, for all its danger and distance, is also a thread of shared humanity, binding you to every trader and dreamer who has ever laid down beneath these stars. Your body sinks slightly into the cool sand where you sit, and you imagine bedding down on rugs patterned with swirling designs. The firelight flickers across your eyelids even through the darkness, painting ghost shapes in red and gold. You hear another story begin inside the Khan, laughter punctuating it, but the sound fades as your own mind wanders. You're halfway to sleep already, rocked not by waves or hammocks, but by the steady rhythm of footsteps across centuries of dust. The Silk Road fades around you, dissolving into scent, sound, and starlight, threads weaving themselves into dreams. And as you finally lean back, resting your head against the soft roll of a saddlebag, you realize that the greatest cargo traded here wasn't silk or spices at all. It was the universal gift of sleep, carried from one weary traveler to another across deserts and through the endless night. The stars above the Silk Road dim, swallowed by a rolling gray fog. Sand under your feet shifts to cobblestones slick with drizzle, and suddenly the air feels damp, heavy, and sharp with coal smoke. You hear the rattle of carriage wheels, the distant clatter of hooves, and the occasional cough of someone disappearing into the mist. You've wandered into Victorian London at night, a city where dreams and nightmares lived side by side, stitched together with gaslight and shadows. You walk down a narrow lane, the lamps hissing faintly as they burn. Their halos cut through the fog only a little, creating more mystery than clarity. The ground is slick, and you step carefully to avoid the muck of rainwater, soot, and who knows what else. A shiver creeps up your spine, not just from the cold but from the feeling that in this city someone might always be watching.
And yet, even in its grime, London hums with life, a restless energy that never really sleeps.
A mainstream fact, during the Victorian age, gas street lamps transformed the city, allowing people to venture out safely at night. Well, safely is generous. The lighting reduced crime in some areas, but it also revealed the darker side of London, pickpockets, gangs, and the occasional figure lurking too long in the mist. Historians still argue whether the gas lamps made people feel safer or simply extended the hours when trouble could find them. Either way, their dim glow feels strangely comforting now, like candles stretched across entire streets. You wander past a pub spilling light and laughter onto the wet cobblestones. Inside, patrons raise pints, sing rowdy songs, and shout over each other in accents thick as the fog outside. The warmth almost tempts you in, but you keep walking deeper into alleys where the laughter fades to silence. Here, the city feels like it's dozing, though never fully asleep. Cats dart across your path, rubbish rustles in corners, and somewhere footsteps echo faintly. Victorians had curious nighttime habits. Families often shared beds, not just out of necessity but also to save warmth. And sleep wasn't always a single, solid block of time. Many households practiced what's called segmented sleep, a first sleep and a second sleep with a waking period in between. People would rise after a few hours, read, pray, or even visit neighbors before returning to bed. Historians still argue whether this was a natural human rhythm or just a product of poor lighting and noisy environments. Imagine explaining that to your boss today. "Sorry I'm late, I was between sleeps." As you turn another corner, the fog thickens until the world shrinks to a few feet around you. You catch the faint glow of another lantern, this one handheld, carried by a watchman patrolling the streets. He nods at you, his breath steaming in the cold, before disappearing into the mist again.
For a moment, you're left with only the sound of your own footsteps.
It's eerie, but there's also comfort in knowing the city never really rests. Someone is always awake, guarding or wandering, carrying the city through the night. You pass by a tenement house, its windows lit faintly from within. Through a gap in the curtains, you glimpse a cramped room where a family huddles around the coal fire. Children doze in makeshift beds, their faces soft despite the smog-stained air. A mother stitches by the firelight, her needle catching the glow, while her husband sits with a book balanced on his knee.
It's a quiet intimacy, a fragile piece carved out of the chaos of the city. You linger at the window, touched by the thought that even in the dirtiest corners of London, sleep still found its way. Then there are the richer quarters. You drift toward a row of townhouses with polished doors and brass knockers gleaming in the lamplight. Inside, heavy curtains are drawn, muffling the world. You imagine grand bedrooms with 4 posters draped in velvet, feather mattresses piled high, and servants tiptoeing through hallways to stoke fires. Yet even here, rest wasn't always easy. Industrial schedules demanded early mornings, and anxiety about illness or crime often kept eyes open long past midnight. A quirky tidbit, some Victorians believed that drinking a glass of warm beer before bed could help them sleep. You're not entirely convinced, though after enough pints at the pub, sleep probably wasn't optional.
The fog begins to thin as you near the Thames. The river lies broad and dark, carrying reflections of lamps and jagged streaks. Barges drift silently, their crews huddled under cloaks. The smell of the water is sharp and sour, a reminder of London's infamous sanitation struggles.
You think of the Great Stink of 1858, when the smell became so unbearable Parliament had to suspend its sessions. Sleep near the river then must have been a challenge, like trying to nap in a room sprayed with vinegar. Yet here, in the cool night air, the river's lull seems more forgiving, its slow current tugging at your thoughts like a blanket pulling you down. You walk across a bridge, the boards slick underfoot, and pause to gaze down at the water. The city spreads out before you, chimneys piercing the sky, rows of lamps twinkling like low stars, and domes and spires rising out of the mist. It's easy to imagine Dickens himself wandering these streets, notebook in hand, gathering the raw material of stories. And you wonder, did he ever struggle to fall asleep after writing about orphans and ghosts and fog? Probably. But then again, maybe the act of writing was its own lullaby, emptying the mind onto the page.
The city fades quicker now, the hour late.
Even pubs begin to shutter and the laughter has faded. Watchmen's footsteps echo less frequently and the fog lifts enough to reveal a crescent moon hanging over the rooftops.
You find yourself in Aquita Lane, where gaslight spills onto ivy-covered walls.
A single cat perches on a window ledge, tail flicking, eyes glowing faintly. The silence here feels softer, more forgiving, as though even London has finally decided to rest.
You lean against the wall, damstone pressing cool against your back, and late the night wrap around you.
The city hums faintly in the distance, but here in this pocket of calm you can almost forget the grime and the noise. You close your eyes, listening to the faint drip of water from a gutter, the soft lap of the river, the quiet sigh of a city that, despite everything, still knows how to dream. And as your breath slows, matching the rhythm of distant footsteps fading into mist, you realize something. Whether in a palace, a tenement, or under the gas lamps themselves, Londoners shared one truth with every sailor, monk, and traveler before them. Eventually, even in the fog, sleep will find you.
The fog of London fades, and with it the cobblestones and cold smoke dissolve. In their place, warmth spills over you like golden honey. You hear the low, steady crash of surf and smell salt heavy in the air. Palm fronds whisper above your head, swaying lazily in the night breaks.
You've stepped onto a Caribbean island where night stretches long and languid and the stars look close enough to pluck like fruit. The sand is warm beneath your bare feet, even though the sun has long set.
You walk slowly along the shore, the moon trailing your path, casting silver across the waves.
The Caribbean has always been a place where time feels a little slippery, where days blur into nights and worries get carried off by the tide. Still, not everyone here slept so easily. Between the rhythm of the sea and the dangers of colonial life, rest was sometimes more elusive than a quiet beach. A mainstream historical fact, European colonists in the Caribbean often struggled with the oppressive heat and rampant mosquitoes, both of which disrupted sleep. They built houses with wide verandas and high ceilings to help airflow, and they used netting to keep insects at bay. But even with these efforts, many wrote letters complaining of suffocating nights. Historians still argue whether these sleepless accounts were exaggerated by homesick settlers or truly unbearable. For the locals who had lived here for centuries, the climate was simply life as usual, heat, humidity, and all.
You wander inland a little, guided by a narrow dirt path lit by fireflies. Their glow pulses gently, like tiny lanterns strung between trees. From somewhere deeper in the jungle, you hear the haunting call of night birds.
You pause, letting the chorus wrap around you, insects buzzing, leaves rustling, waves in the distance.
It's a symphony designed to lull you into drowsiness, unless, of course, you're the sort to lie awake counting how many mysterious animal noises could possibly eat you. Quirky tidbit: some communities in the Caribbean believed that hanging certain herbs above the bed could ward off nightmares. Basil in particular was thought to invite peaceful dreams. So if your modern lavender pillow spray doesn't work, you might try a sprig of basil next time, though your bedroom might end up smelling like a pizza shop. You reach a small village near the water's edge. Lanterns glow faintly in the windows of wooden houses perched on stilts. Inside one, you glimpse a family sprawled on mats, the air moving slowly through open shutters. Children murmur in their sleep, turning restlessly, while their mother fans them with a woven palm frond. Sleep here isn't silent, it's layered with the rhythm of waves, the hiss of cicadas, and the occasional bark of a dog. But somehow the noise feels more like a lullaby than a disturbance. Further along, a plantation house rises against the horizon. Its wide veranda gleams in the moonlight, rocking chairs swaying slightly in the breeze. You imagine the planter and his family retreating indoors, the air heavy with the scent of rum. Sleep in such a house might come easier: white sheets, high beds, servants ensuring windows stayed open for air. Yet even here, rest was fragile. Fears of hurricanes, rebellion, or disease haunted the night. It wasn't always the weather keeping people awake. Sometimes it was the weight of their own anxieties. You pause by a bonfire on the beach where a group gathers. They share stories, voices low but animated, weaving myths about spirits that wander at night. One tale is of the Sukian, a creature that sheds its skin and flies through the darkness as a ball of fire, slipping through keyholes to drink people's blood as they sleep. You glance over your shoulder instinctively because nothing says bedtime like worrying about a fireball vampire sneaking under your door. Historians still argue whether these tales were told primarily to scare children into behaving or as symbolic warnings about real dangers in the night. Either way, the stories linger like smoke in the imagination. As the night stretched deeper, the crepuscular, almost forgiving. The wilde quiets, the fire burns lower, and only the steady crash of the sea remains. You lie down in the sand, watching constellations splat overhead. The Milky Way cut across the sky like a pale river. Ancient navigators once used these very stars to travel between islands, and now they feel like old companions guiding you towards sleep. Your eyes drift closed, but you imagine for a moment how sailors must have felt, anchored offshore. The rocking of the ship a lullaby, yes, but also a reminder of isolation. Letters home took months, diseases spread easily, and the endless horizon could feel like both freedom and prison. Many sailors slept in hammocks slung in the hold, swaying gently with the motion of the ship. Some historians still argue whether hammocks improved sleep compared to bunks, but sailors swore by them. If you've ever tried one, you know the rocking either soothes you instantly or convinces you you're about to be flipped onto the ground. Back on land, though, sleep is easier. The night has cooled, the stars blanket the sky, and the rhythm of the waves pulls at your consciousness. You picture yourself in one of those open-air houses, netting draped lightly around your bed, basil hung above the doorway. The sounds of the island wrap around you, crickets surf, the whisper of palms. The heat is bearable now, softened by the night breeze. You turn angst twisse ten zettle. And here, in the Caribbean dark, you understand what so many before you knew. That sleep, even when elusive, eventually bends to rhythm, the rhythm of waves, of insects, of wind through leaves. The world keeps humming, but you sink beneath it, carried as easily as driftwood out to sea. The warmth of the Caribbean Sea fades, and in its place comes a sharper, drier air. The sound of waves dissolves into silence broken only by the crackle of firewood and the occasional bray of a donkey.
When you open your eyes again, you're in the heart of a Spanish village centuries ago, where the nights stretched long and the siesta rhythms ruled the day. The cobbled streets glow faintly in the moonlight, and the smell of olive oil and bread lingers faintly from kitchens that closed hours ago. The village feels almost too quiet, as if it is conserving energy for the relentless sun of tomorrow. A few lanterns flicker along the plaza, their light throwing shadows across whitewashed walls. In the center stands a fountain, its water murmuring softly, like an insistent whisper urging you to sit and rest. You do, listening to the stillness of a place where sleep has always been a negotiation between the heat of the day and the coolness of the night. A mainstream historical fact: in Spain and much of southern Europe, the tradition of the siesta developed to help people cope with the midday sun. Workers would retreat indoors, nap during the hottest hours, and then resume labor in the cooler evening. Historians still argue whether the siesta was primarily a response to climate or a deeply ingrained cultural rhythm passed down from ancient times.
Wait for the origin, it schapit nicht le rest. If you'd already napped for 2 hours in the afternoon, bedtime might stretch later into the night. You wander through narrow alleys where balconies lean close overhead, draped with drying laundry that flutters faintly in the breeze. A cat darts past, slipping into the shadows. From behind shuttered windows comes the faint sound of a guitar, some Jonas strumming quickly before sleep. The notes float through the night air like a lullaby meant for no one in particular, and you feel your body sway as though rocked by the melody itself. Quirky tidbit: some Spaniards in the 16th century believed garlic hung over the bed could protect against nightmares and wandering spirits. Imagine explaining to your partner that the reason your bedroom smells like a pizzeria is because you're warding off dream demons. Effective or not, it reveals just how much care people gave to securing peaceful rest. The village homes here are simple but designed with sleep in mind. Thick stone walls trap coolness, while small windows keep out the scorching sun. Inside, wooden beams stretch across ceilings, and low beds are pushed against plaster walls. You peek into one such home, where a family lies sprawled on straw-stuffed mattresses, the youngest curled up at the foot of the bed. Candles burn low in iron holders, casting soft shadows that pulse with the rhythm of the flame. Sleep in this world isn't solitary, it's a communal act, shared and visible, woven into the fabric of family life. You step back into the street and find yourself drawn to the church that towers above the square. Its bell tower looms dark against the starry sky, though the bell itself rests until dawn. Churches dictated much of village life, including sleep. Bells tolled early to mark Mass, dragging villagers from their beds. Some historians still argue whether the church's strict schedule clashed with the natural rhythms of siesta culture, or whether it simply blended into the pattern. Either way, if you thought your alarm clock was annoying, imagine being woken by a bell loud enough to shake the birds from the rafters. Nearby, a tavern door creaks open. A handful of men stumble out, laughing, their shadows stretching across the square. Even in a sleepy village, the tavern was the one place still alive after midnight. Inside, cheap wine flowed freely, songs echoed against the stone walls, and dice clattered across wooden tables. The men disappear down an alley, their laughter trailing behind them, leaving the square quiet again. It's a reminder that not every villager treated sleep as sacred. For some, the lure of company and wine outweighed the promise of dreams. You follow a dead path out of the village, where olive groves stretch beneath the moonlight. The trees twist and bend like ancient guardians, their silver leaves shimmering softly. Here the Erfolgskula and the Height of cicadas fills the silence. Farmers once labored in these groves from dawn until the heat grew unbearable, retreating home for the siesta before returning to finish work by moonlight. You can almost picture them walking this path, tired but grateful, ready to collapse into bed after long hours under the unforgiving sun. On a hill above the groves, a lone windmill creaks it slowly in the night air. Its silhouette cuts a familiar shape against the stars, one that would inspire Cervantes to dream up Don Quixote centuries later. You wonder, did he write late into the night, fueled by wine and restless imagination, or did he, like his countrymen, let the siesta reshape his waking hours? Historians still argue whether his book was a reflection of sleepless madness or genius born of unusual rhythms. Either way, it stands as proof that even odd sleep schedules can produce immortal ideas. You sit in the grass near the windmill, the earth still warm from the day's sun. Fireflies blink faintly, echoing the distant lanterns of the village below. The night air is heavy with the scent of rosemary and thyme, herbs grown not just for cooking, but also to sprinkle under pillows for better dreams. Your eyelids grow heavier as the air grows stiller, wrapping you in silence. And here, beneath the Spanish stars, you feel the tug of a rhythm older than clocks and bells. Sleep here is not about strict hours or silent rooms. It's about bending with the seasons, surrendering to the heat, and trusting that night will balance what day demanded. You close your eyes, the cicadas humming, the fountain murmuring faintly in the distance, and you drift into a dream shaped by olive groves, guitar strings, and the long, patient rhythm of siesta. The olive groves dissolve, and suddenly you are surrounded by stone, smoke, and an undercurrent of energy that never quite settles. Rome, the eternal city buzzing even at night. You find yourself standing at the edge of the Forum, columns rising like silent guardians against a moon that seems hazy through the smoke of oil lamps. The hum of conversation drifts faintly from the shadows, traders still haggling, soldiers laughing after a long patrol, and the faint clatter of pottery being stacked in stalls even after dark. Rome, you realize, doesn't really believe in bedtime. You start to walk, sandals clicking on uneven cobblestones. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of baked bread from an all-night bakery. That's no coincidence. Mainstream fact, Roman bakers began their work in the middle of the night so that fresh loaves would be ready for citizens at dawn. It meant that while most people were trying to sleep, a whole workforce was up to their elbows in flour. Historians still argue whether this night labor made the city more efficient or just left half the population perpetually cranky from interrupted rest. You pass by a tavern where oil lamps sputter in the windows. Inside, sailors, merchants, and gladiators on their off days drink watered-down wine. The laughter is raucous, punctuated by someone slamming dice onto a wooden table. A mangy dog sleeps under a bench, twitching at invisible rabbits. For a moment you think about stepping inside, but you remember that nothing good for sleep has ever started with the phrase, "just one more round." Out in the streets again, you notice small shrines tucked into corners. At one, a tiny altar glows with offerings to Somnus, the god of sleep, and to his family of dream spirits. A weary mother kneels there, whispering prayers for her sick child to rest without fever. You can almost feel the desperation in her voice. Sleep wasn't just luxury in Rome, it was divine, a gift or punishment sent from the gods. Quirky tidbit, Romans sometimes ate roasted dormice dipped in honey as a bedtime snack. Yes, Dalmas. You're imagining it right now, tiny, golden brown, sugary rodents on a plate. Apparently they believed it soothed digestion and calmed the mind. Historians still argue whether this was an actual sleep aid or just an excuse for the wealthy to show off how much honey and leisure time they had. Either way, you suddenly appreciate your chamomile tea a lot more. You wander toward the Circus Maximus. By day, the roar of chariots and cheers of 150,000 spectators would thunder here. Now it lies empty, its silence so vast it almost hums. You stand in the center, imagining the gusts of race past still racing through the night. For the families who lived nearby, that daytime racket must have made quiet nights all the more precious, if they ever came at all. Climbing a hill, you pass the massive palaces of emperors.
Through an open colonnade, you glimpse silken curtains, golden lamps, and quartz patrolling. Inside those chambers, emperors tried to rest on feather-stuffed mattresses. But luxury doesn't guarantee sleep. Augustus himself famously battled insomnia, pacing the halls at night, calling for servants to read to him until exhaustion won. Imagine being the unlucky servant who had to recite Virgil over and over until Caesar finally snored. But ordinary Romans didn't live like emperors. You find a narrow alley lined with insulae cramped apartment blocks that tower above the street. From one open window you hear snores, from another a baby crying. Families squeezed into tiny rooms, straw mattresses thrown on the floor, everyone wrapped in blankets against the draft. Fires were banned at night for safety, so people shivered in winter and sweltered in summer. And still, somehow, they managed to dream. Historians still argue whether the noise, smoke, and sheer press of bodies made rest impossible, or whether people simply accepted exhaustion as part of Roman life.
The moon climbs here.
A watchman passes, torch in hand, nodding as he scans alleys for thieves. You fall into step behind him until he turns away, leaving you with only the crunch of your own footsteps. Ahead lies the Tiber, reflecting the light of scattered torches. Fishermen sit on its banks, lines dangling in the current, as if the river itself never sleeps either.
You pause on the bridge, the night wind tugging at your clothes.
Behind you lies the grandeur of palaces, the chaos of taverns, the hush of temples. Before you stretches a city that has always carried both ambition and exhaustion in equal measure. Rome is never fully at rest, but you realize that individuals, no matter their station, still sought the same peace you do, to lie down, to close their eyes, and to find the mercy of dreams. You walk back toward the quiet domes on the edge of the city. Inside, a modest family sleeps. Children curl at the foot of a bed, their parents sprawled on mats nearby.
An oil lamp flickers low, shadows soft against painted walls.
Their breathing is steady, and for the first time tonight, the city outside seems to pause.
You lean against the doorway, letting that height wash over you.
The stars above Rome glitter faintly, dimmed by smoke but steady. You stretch out on the cool stone floor, close your eyes, and let the sounds of the city soften into background hum. Even here, in the empire's restless heart, you find stillness.
And sleep at last fails close.
The cool stones of Rome fade beneath you, and when you blink again, the air feels hushed, fragrant, and surprisingly still. Lanterns glow faintly, not from smoky oil but from polished paper shades, their soft light trembling in the breeze. You're standing in the narrow streets of Kyoto during the Edo period, where night carries both ritual and mystery.
Wooden houses lean close together, tiled roofs glistening with dew, and the scent of tatami mats and green tea lingers in the air.
The city is quieter than Rome, more disciplined, as though even the night has rules. You hear the faint patter of Geta sandals on the road, a lone figure moving swiftly before disappearing into a side alley. The air feels carefully arranged, as though someone swept the street and placed each lantern precisely where it belongs. Sleep here, you sense, was never just a bodily need, but a reflection of harmony, order, and the rhythms of nature. Mainstream historical fact: during the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, most Japanese families slept on futon mattresses laid directly on tatami mats, rolling them out at night and storing them away during the day. This practice made rooms flexible, spaces could transform from living areas to bedrooms seamlessly. Historians still argue whether this nightly ritual of unrolling and rolling away mats created a healthier relationship with sleep, or whether it was simply a matter of practicality in homes where space was scarce.
You peek into a machiya, a traditional wooden townhouse. Inside, a family prepares for the night.
The sliding doors are shut, paper screens glowing softly with lantern light. A mother smooths out a futon, tucking her children under cotton quilts, while the father blows out the flame of an oil lamp. The air smells faintly of rice straw from the tatami. Sleep here feels less about shutting out the world and more about blending into it, like drifting into the folds of a carefully written poem. A quirky tidbit: some Edo period households placed a small doll called a Migawari Ninjio beside the futon. The doll was meant to absorb illness or misfortune in place of the sleeper. If you woke up sick, well, either the doll wasn't working or it had questionable job performance reviews. Still, it's oddly comforting to imagine a little guardian snoozing beside you like a plush toy with a supernatural resume. Outside, the city winds down. Tea houses close their doors, though the faint pluck of a shamisen still drifts from one where revelers linger. You glimpse a group of men, merchants maybe, stumbling home, their laughter subdued out of respect for the hour. Edo nights were not entirely silent, though. Firewatch patrols roamed the streets, clapping wooden blocks together to announce their presence. Fires were a constant danger in the wooden city, and the sound of those patrols was both reassuring and a reminder that disaster lurked just a stray ember away. Historians still argue whether those patrols reduced fires or simply kept residents awake with their incessant clapping. You wander toward a temple garden where gravel crunches softly beneath your feet. Lanterns cast pale circles across mossy stones, and the air smells faintly of pine. Monks here practiced strict schedules, often waking long before dawn for meditation. Some believed too much sleep dulled the spirit, so they trained themselves to rest lightly, rising at the faintest hint of morning. You imagine trying to explain that to yourself at 6 a.m. I'm not tired, I'm spiritually sharpening. Right. You sit on a wooden veranda, gazing at a koi pond that reflects the moon. The water ripples gently as fish break the surface, their movements slow, deliberate. It mirrors the way people here approached sleep, not rushed, not forced, but allowed to flow naturally. The very architecture of Edo homes invited rest. Low ceilings, sliding screens, and natural materials softened the boundary between people and their environment. Further along you find a small inn, a ryokan, where travelers lay their heads. Inside, futons are neatly lined in rows, each guest cocooned in cotton. The scent of cedar fills the air from wooden baths, still steaming from earlier use. You can almost hear the sighs of weary merchants, relieved to have reached shelter on the Tokado Road. For them, sleep was less ritual and more survival. Tomorrow promised another long day of walking, bargaining, or braving mountain passes. A quirky detail drifts back into your mind. Some Edo towns enforced a form of curfew, ringing a bell at dusk to mark the end of the day. Afterward, travel was restricted and most households dimmed their lanterns. This wasn't just about order, it nudged people toward rest. Imagine if your city today rang a giant bell and told everyone to put their phones down and go to bed. Honestly, it might solve half of modern insomnia. You walk back toward the Kumo River, where the current murmurs quietly under wooden bridges. The city glimmers faintly behind you, but here, near the water, the night feels spacious. Fireflies drift above the reeds, pulsing in slow, sleepy rhythms. A pair of fishermen doze in their boats, nets dangling loosely over the side. The river, like the people, seems to breathe with patience, unhurried by clocks. As the night deepens, the lanterns in the streets wink out one by one. Only the moon remains, silver and soft, casting the city in a pale wash. You lie down beneath a cherry tree, its branches bare in the season but still graceful against the sky. The ground smells faintly of damp earth, and the rustle of leaves becomes your lullaby. And here, under the stars of Edo, Japan, you realize that sleep was more than just rest. It was part of the balance between order and nature, between ritual and necessity. Whether guided by dolls, guided by monks, or soothed by tatami mats, the people here surrendered themselves to the night with quiet acceptance. You close your eyes, listening to the faint clap of fire patrol blocks in the distance, and let the peace of this ordered world carry you toward dreams. It's a cherry blossoms of Kyoto dissolve into golden lantern. Light, and when your eyes open again, you're standing in the heart of Byzantium.
It's late evening, but the markets are far from sleeping.
Stalls still glow with oil lamps, fabrics shimmer like liquid fire, and the scents of cinnamon, roasted lamb, and sea salt collide in the warm night air. The hum of voices lingers in every corner, and you realize that while most cities quiet down when darkness falls, Constantinople in its prime simply shifted gears. Night here was another stage for commerce, gossip, and half-whispered secrets. You wander beneath archways where silk sways from wooden beams, dyed in brilliant purples and blues that once cost more than their weight in gold. Merchants call out prices, haggling with travelers who look like they've walked 1,000 dusty miles to reach this crossroad of empires. You hear Greek, Latin, Arabic, Armenian, all weaving into a strange lullaby of trade. You can almost feel your eyelids grow heavy just from the rhythm of the bargaining. Too much, too little, just enough. A historian might tell you that the Byzantine market was famous for its regulation, with imperial inspectors roaming stalls to check weights and prevent fraud. And yet historians still argue whether these inspectors genuinely protected consumers or simply pocketed bribes while sipping spiced wine in back alleys. Your attention drifts to a stall selling glittering lamps, their brass sides pierced with intricate patterns. The merchant claims each one contains a charm against nightmares, light it before bed and the shadows will stay away. A quirky tidbit, some Byzantines genuinely believed in dream interpretation as a form of prophecy. There was even a manual, the Oneirocritica by Artemidorus, that circulated widely, offering guidance on whether your dream of a snake meant wealth, doom, or just indigestion. Imagine rolling over at night mumbling, "Oh great, now I have to decode this like a crossword puzzle before breakfast." You stroll deeper into the bazaar where the clink of coins mixes with the soft notes of a lute. A young woman sings a ballad about lost love, her voice carrying easily above the din. Around her, men sip from clay cups, their faces glowing from both wine and admiration. Night markets weren't just about trade, they were theaters where music, gossip, and performance stitched people together. The lamps flicker as a warm breeze drifts in from the Bosporus. The scent of fish reminds you that just beyond the city walls, fishermen are still at work, casting nets by moonlight. For many, the night was their livelihood. By morning, their catch would appear on these very stalls, ready to be grilled, salted, or shipped across seas. You picture the fisherman, yawning wide, wishing he could trade places with the merchant's fat cat sprawled on a silk cushion. As you move toward a quieter corner, you notice the heavy marble walls of a church looming nearby. Inside, flickering candles illuminate golden mosaics. The space is cavernous, but the whispers of worshippers echo softly, carried upward into domes that seem to dissolve into starlight. Sleep here was intertwined with faith. Many Byzantines believed that nighttime prayers guarded them from demons known as Aphaltes, said to sit on sleepers' chests and bring nightmares. Today we'd probably just call it sleep paralysis, but back then it was supernatural warfare. And if you've ever woken up frozen while your brain plays tricks on you, you know night demons need no introduction. A procession drifts by as you step back outside, a line of monks in dark robes carrying lanterns. Their chants mix with the clamor of the market, sacred and profane layered on top of each other. You follow for a while, the glow of their candles bobbing gently like stars adrift in human hands. Eventually, the monks vanish into the shadows, leaving behind the faint scent of incense. You return to the stalls, now quieter as midnight draws near. A group of merchants sit cross-legged, playing dice on a scrap of cloth. Their laughter rings out as one groans dramatically over a bad roll. Gambling, though frowned upon by authorities, flourished anyway.
Historians still argue whether this pastime was merely harmless fun or a serious drain on households, leading more than one weary wife to mutter, "We could have bought a goat with that money."
In another corner, healers and quacks alike hawk remedies for sleeplessness, pouches of lavender, vials of honeyed wine, even talismans etched with symbols. One man swears that rubbing crushed poppy seeds on your eyelids will bring dreams of paradise.
"You wisely resist the urge to test that one out."
Another stall sells pillows stuffed with goose feathers, a luxury at the time, and you run your hand across them, realizing how long humanity has chased comfort in the night. Your feet eventually carry you out of the main square and toward a quieter courtyard. The marble is cool beneath you as you sit, listening to the murmur of a fountain. Water trickles steadily, soft as a lullaby. For the first time tonight the bustle fades and you can hear the city breathe, a sleeping giant wrapped in walls of stone. Above, the stars gleam faintly, dimmed by the lanterns but still present. Somewhere in the palace the emperor himself might be awake, plotting policies or fretting over enemies. The market you just walked through is part of his lifeblood, feeding his coffers, feeding his people. Yet here in this quiet courtyard it feels very far away. You lean back against the stone, your body heavy, your mind softened by the rhythm of trade, song and word.
The night air tastes faintly of spice and smoke, and the glow of the last lamps wavers like tired eyes. The Byzantines lived in a city where East met West, where faith brushed shoulders with commerce, where dreams themselves were considered maps to hidden truths. And as you let your own eyes close, you realize sleep is a kind of market too. You trade your worries for rest, your consciousness for the mystery of dreams, and like any good bargain in Constantinople, you hope you get the better end of the deal. The glow of Byzantium's lanterns fades, and suddenly the night around you feels heavier, dustier, as though you've stepped into a forgotten room sealed for centuries. The air smells faintly of parchment, leather, and the slow crumble of time. You're inside a library, but not just any library. This one feels endless, its shelves towering into darkness, its scrolls and codices stacked like sleeping giants. The hush here is absolute, broken only by the faint scratch of a quill somewhere, as if one last scholar refuses to let go of their work. You run your fingers along cracked bindings.
The titles whisper of worlds lost, Aristotle's On Comedy, a book that doesn't survive in modern times, hints at laughter we can never hear. Another scroll promises cures for sleeplessness using herbs so rare their names read like incantations. A historian might remind you that the Library of Alexandria was the most famous casualty of time's neglect, a place said to contain hundreds of thousands of works, much of which was lost. Historians still argue whether its destruction was a single fiery disaster or a slow decline caused by politics, neglect, and the occasional "oops, left that candle too close to the papyrus." In the corner, you spot a scholar hunched over a desk, his candle guttering low. His robes are threadbare, but his eyes burn with stubborn focus. He dips his quill, scratches a few words, then pauses to rest his head against his hand, clearly battling sleep. You know the look, the same face you make at 2 a.m. when you tell yourself just one more page or just one more episode.
Human stubbornness hasn't changed in 2,000 years.
A quirky tidbit, medieval monks often scribbled notes in the margins of manuscripts when they were tired. One famous monk in the 9th century wrote, "The hand that wrote this is tired." Another scrawled, "This parchment is hairy." It's comforting to know that even the guardians of knowledge couldn't resist doodling complaints. Somewhere out there is the ancestor of the bored student writing "Send help" in the back of a math textbook.
You drift through the isles, raining your hands across vellum-smouthed skin.
Some texts shimmer with golden illumination, tiny painted saints and vines curling across the page. Others are bare, their ink faded to the color of dust. But all of them share a kind of quiet defiance, knowledge refusing to vanish even when the world outside forgets. You pause at a shelf where scrolls lean precariously. One unrolls as you touch it, revealing strange diagrams of the heavens. Stars, drawn in careful circles, track the movements of planets. The text speculates on how celestial rhythms affect sleep, whether the moon's fullness quickens dreams or Saturn's gaze brings restless nights. Historians still argue whether ancient astrology was seen as serious science or simply a very elaborate bedtime story. Either way, it's proof that humans have always tried to explain why sleep sometimes feels like an obedient servant and sometimes like a stubborn mule.
Deeper inside the library, sehr groß Kolder.
You hear faint echoes, not voices exactly, but impressions, as if the books themselves are murmuring in languages no one speaks anymore. It's oddly soothing, like being surrounded by 1,000 grandfathers telling bedtime stories at once. The sheer weight of forgotten thought presses against you, and you feel your own mind slowing, matching the tempo of the centuries. You come to a chamber lined with locked cabinets. Inside, precious works are sealed behind iron grills. A legend floats into your mind. Some texts, particularly those deemed dangerous, were hidden away deliberately, grimoires of magic, radical philosophies, scandalous plays. A quirky rumor suggests the Vatican archives still contain such forbidden texts, though historians still argue whether that's conspiracy theory or well-kept fact. The idea that books could be too powerful to read adds a strange thrill. You almost want to sneak one into your bag. But knowing your luck, you'd pick the one about curing hiccups with leeches. The scholar from earlier shuffles past you, carrying a bundle of scrolls. His candle burns low, wax dripping onto the floor. He doesn't notice you, too lost in his own world. You follow him to a scriptorium, where others sit copying texts by hand. Their quills scratch in unison, a kind of rhythm like rain on a roof. One yawns, nearly smudging his page, while another mutters under his breath. Sleep here is both enemy and necessity. These men fight it with bitter herbs, splashing cold water on their faces, anything to keep the words alive.
The smell of ink and tallow thickens, and you step outside into a courtyard.
The stairs stretch above, brichter with the heads of modern lights. Somewhere an owl hoots, its call echoing through the empty arches. A fountain trickles softly, and you imagine the monks washing their ink-stained fingers before rolling out thin mattresses stuffed with straw. Their bodies may rest, but their minds carry echoes of the day's work, the hum of words, the dance of ink across parchment, the weight of secrets that might never see daylight. You stretch out on a stone bench, the night cool against your skin. Around you the library seems alive, its silence heavy but not unfriendly. Every wall hums with what has been forgotten, yet what still survives in scraps and fragments. It's a reminder that history is not a neat bedtime story. It's a patchwork quilt full of missing squares, stitched together with guesswork, rumor, and the occasional doodle of a monk who really wanted lunch. The fountain's murmur deepens, syncing with your heartbeat. The books above you stand like guardians, keeping vigil while you drift. Knowledge, fragile yet enduring, whispers lullabies of its own. And as your eyes close, you surrender to the comfort of knowing that even when memory fades, even when whole libraries fall to ash, some part of it always lingers, echoing, waiting, dreaming with you. The cool stone bench beneath you softens into wood that creaks gently, and suddenly you're swaying ever so slightly. The salty tang in the air and the low groan of rigging give it away. You're on a ship, resting in some forgotten harbor where the sea hums its endless lullaby. The night here is thick, salted by mist, and pierced with distant lantern light reflected on black waves. Sailors move about like shadows, their boots thudding softly on wet planks, their voices lowered as though afraid to disturb the ocean itself.
You lean against the rail, failing the steady rise, and fall off the water, Bennett.
Somewhere below, whales call out to each other, deep sonorous notes that roll through the night like echoes from another world. The sound is haunting, yet soothing, like the earth itself is humming to keep you asleep. Sailors in many cultures spoke of these songs as omens. Some believed they were the cries of drowned spirits, others swore they were warnings of storms to come. Historians still argue whether whalers exaggerated these tales to impress wide-eyed villagers back home, or whether living months at sea truly made every creak and echo feel supernatural.
A sailor nearby strums a crude instrument, a melody rising above the waves.
His voice is rough but steady, carrying an old sea ballad. It's a tune designed for work but softened now into something like a lullaby. Other sailors hum along, their faces shadowed, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. It's a reminder that the sea was not just labor and peril, it was rhythm, tradition, and strange beauty. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Sailors often believed that whistling on deck at night would summon the wind, or worse, a storm. That's why sea shanties existed. Singing was allowed, whistling was cursed. Imagine explaining that rule to your coworker today. No whistling in the office, it might summon a Category 5 hurricane. You pace toward the bow, where the water stretches endlessly, glimmering faintly under the moon. In the far distance, another ship's lantern swings, a lonely dot across the vastness. You picture its sailors doing the same, singing, whispering, maybe dreaming of dry land. Despite the emptiness, you feel less alone knowing another vessel floats out there in the dark, sharing your rhythm. You duck below deck, where hammocks sway in unison. Men snore softly, their boots tossed haphazardly beneath them. One mutters in his sleep, perhaps dreaming of home, while another clutches a small wooden carving to his chest. The air is thick with tar, salt, and sweat, but there's also a strange warmth in the closeness, a communal surrender to rest. Mainstream historical fact: hammocks became the preferred bedding on ships by the 16th century because they kept sailors from rolling onto the floor during rough seas. They also made it harder for rats to nibble at your toes in the night, which seems like a pretty solid selling point.
You lie back in an empty hammock letting it cradle you. The wood around you creaks, the ship shifting like a giant cradle rocked by unseen hands.
It's both eerie and comforting, this reminder that you are never entirely still at sea. Even in sleep, you're carried somewhere, rocked toward a horizon you cannot see. Above deck again, you find a sailor keeping watch. His face is lined, his eyes scanning the waves. He gestures toward the stars, pointing out constellations. For centuries, sailors used those very lights as maps, guiding them across oceans long before compasses became reliable. There's something hypnotic about imagining a crew asleep below, their fates tethered to one man watching the sky. Historians still argue whether ancient Polynesian navigation by stars and wave patterns was more advanced than later European methods. It's one of those debates that reveals how much skill can vanish from history like footprints in the sand. The watchman tells you of ghost lights seen at sea, St. Elmo's fire, eerie blue flames that dance on masts during electrical storms. Sailors once took them as signs of protection, though skeptics today would call them plasma discharges. Still, in the middle of a black, endless ocean with lightning cracking overhead, wouldn't you prefer to believe a saint was looking out for you? You drift to the stern where the sea churns into froth. Lanterns flicker weakly, their light no match for the expanse of night.
Some wäre a sailor coughs 10 settlers back into slumber. The Wallason rises again, echoing across the dark. It's deep, resonant, and oddly familiar, as if the ocean itself has joined the crew in their bedtime chorus.
A quirky superstition comes to mind. Some sailors swore that if a whale swam under your ship at night, it carried your dreams with it to the depths, hiding them until morning. Others said whales could swallow entire ships if angered. You find it funny how quickly creatures shift from benevolent lullaby singers to giant nightmare-fuel submarines, depending on who you asked.
The night stretches on. The stars glitter, the sea murmurs, and the hammocks sway in rhythm.
There's no silence here, only layers of sound blending into something strangely gentle. Creaks, snores, waves, the occasional thump of a barrel shifting.
And beneath it all the deep pulse of wild song, steady and ancient like the heartbeat of the world. You close your eyes, still rocked by the ship's movement. Sleep here feels inevitable, woven into the ocean's breathing. And as you drift, you realize this is what rest has always been, a surrender to forces larger than yourself, trusting that the tide will carry you where you're meant to go. The creaking of ropes and the heavy lull of the waves dissolve, and suddenly your feet meet cobblestone slick with evening drizzle. The air smells faintly of roasted chestnuts and wet stone. You've wandered into Paris, the city of light, but this is the Paris of gas lamps and candlelit cafes, where the boulevards glow faintly under flickering flames. The night is alive but unhurried, a quiet murmur drifting through narrow streets lined with shuttered windows. You step onto a wide boulevard where rows of lamps cast golden halos onto the pavement. Carriages rattle past, wheels splashing water from shallow puddles. Somewhere the bells of Notre Dame toll softly, echoing through the mist.
Paris at night, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries, was a world that balanced elegance and danger. Cafes brimming with poets and revolutionaries sat only a few alleys away from shadows where thieves lurked. Historians still argue whether gaslighting truly made Paris safer or simply made it easier to see trouble coming before it reached you. You pause at a cafe with fogged-up windows. Inside, a group of men and women huddle around tiny tables, their cups steaming with coffee or mulled wine. Their laughter carries into the street, along with the scratch of pens across paper. You recognize a few names whispered: Baudelaire, Hugo, maybe even a young Verlaine, scribbling lines that would outlive them all. Mainstream historical fact: by the mid-19th century, Paris had become a hub for writers and artists who turned the city's nights into workshops of ideas. Whole movements like Romanticism and Symbolism were shaped in these cramped, smoky cafes.
You slip inside.
The room glows with candlelight, shadows dancing across peeling wallpaper. A poet is reciting verses, his voice lilting, while someone else interrupts with a drunken joke that makes the table roar. There's passion in the air, both for words and for the warmth of company. A quirky tidbit: some cafes hired professional listeners, people who weren't writers at all but came just to nod, sigh, or clap at the right moments. Basically, the 19th century version of a laugh track. You imagine getting paid to listen to poetry and think, not the worst gig in history.
Back outside, you follow the sound of a violin drifting from another corner.
A street musician leans against a lamppost, his bow moving slowly, each note lingering like perfume in the air. A couple stops to listen, their silhouettes framed by the fog, before walking hand in hand into the mist. You can't help but notice how everything in Paris seems designed for drama, even when it's unintentional.
A spilled drink, a lamplit kiss, even the act of yawning on a bench feels like it belongs in a painting. You wander toward Montmartre, the hill alive with taverns and dance halls. The Moulin de la Galette is already buzzing, its wooden windmill looming above as music drifts from inside. Here, workers and artists mix, dancing until dawn, their laughter spilling into the streets. Sleep doesn't come easily in Montmartre. It's delayed, bargained with, drowned in wine and song. Yet when it does arrive, it crashes like a wave, sudden and irresistible. Inside one hall, men and women whirl beneath chandeliers, skirts flashing, boots stomping.
At a corner table, Toulouse-Lautrec sketches frantically, capturing the motion in smudged lines. A historian might tell you that Montmartre was the birthplace of Bohemian culture, where art and excess intertwined shamelessly. Historians still argue whether this chaos helped create genius or simply destroyed it faster, but in the moment it hardly matters.
You step outside again, air cool against your skin. The gas lamps hiss faintly, their flames bending in the breeze. Above, the stars peek through gaps in the mist, and the city spreads out like a blanket of light and shadow. Paris breathes differently at night, slower, softer, but full of hidden currents. Down a quieter alley, you stumble upon a bookseller closing his stall. He tucks volumes under his arm, muttering about damp ruining the bindings. You glance at the covers, treatises on sleep, guides to dream interpretation, even a slim booklet on how to ward off nightmares with lavender and prayer. He notices your interest and smirks. Dreams, he says in French, are the city's second commerce. You lauk, thinking how truth set fails, Paris sells romance by day and dreams by night. You drift toward the Seine. Bridges arch gracefully over the dark water, their reflections rippling in gold. Lovers lean against railings, whispering, while a lone fisherman nods off beside his line. The river murmurs, carrying secrets downstream. It's easy to see why so many painters, writers, and wanderers found themselves drawn here. Paris at night feels both infinite and intimate, like the city exists just for you and your sleepy thoughts. A quirky detail floats into memory. In the 19th century, some Parisians swore that walking along the Seine at night cured insomnia. The steady rhythm of the water, they said, lulled the restless into calm. Of course, others claimed it was just the wine talking. Historians still argue whether those moonlit strolls were therapeutic or just another excuse to avoid going home. As the hour deepens, shutters close, cafes dim their lamps, and even Montmartre quiets to a hum. You sit on a stone bench by the river, the breeze carrying the scent of wet leaves and fading tobacco. The Eiffel Tower doesn't exist yet in this Paris, but the stars above provide enough spectacle. You lean back, eyes heavy, listening to the last violin string fade into silence. Paris has given you poetry, laughter, and the hush of water beneath bridges. And as your breathing slows, you realize the city doesn't just sparkle with life, it also knows how to cradle its dreamers, wrapping them in the soft fabric of night until morning comes. The murmur of the Seine fades, and suddenly you find yourself standing before a massive blocks of limestone racing like silent guardians against the night sky. The pyramids loom before you, their edges softened by moonlight, each stone carrying centuries of secrets. The desert air feels cooler now, yet still dry, brushing against your skin like parchment. This is not the Paris of cafes or poets. This is the eternal Egypt where whispers hide in shadowed chambers and the night itself feels older than memory. You step closer. The sands shift beneath your feet, grains crunching softly, and the closer you come, the heavier the silence becomes. The pyramids were built as tombs, as doorways, as staircases for pharaohs to ascend to the gods. And though thousands of years have passed, their presence still demands awe. Historians still argue whether the Great Pyramid of Giza was designed with precise star alignments, or whether its architecture simply reflects power and symmetry. But standing here, you feel as though the entire universe bends toward these stones. At the base of the pyramid, a narrow opening yawns like a mouth. Torches flicker wheaten, casting long, trembling shadows along the passage walls. You step inside, and the desert night falls away, replaced by a hushed stillness. The air grows heavier, warmer, filled with the scent of dust and stone. Your footsteps echo softly as if someone or something might be listening. Hieroglyphs line the walls, their symbols dancing in the dim light. Falcons, eyes, scarabs, reeds, they tell stories of gods and journeys, of kings who hoped their names would last forever. A curious detail, some chambers inside pyramids contain tiny shafts leading upward, pointing not to fresh air but to constellations. Historians still debate their purpose. Were they spirit pathways guiding a soul toward Orion or Sirius? Or were they mere architectural quirks? No one knows for certain. But in this silence you imagine a pharaoh's spirit, gliding upward, carried on a current of stars. Deeper you go. The corridor narrows, forcing you to bow slightly. You trail your fingers along cool stone, tracing grooves cut by workers millennia ago. Some legends claim those workers sang while chiseling, their voices echoing in the half-finished chambers like lullabies to the gods. You can almost hear it now, a low hum vibrating through the walls, calming, hypnotic.
Finally, you reach a chamber. Its ceiling rises above you, shaped like a vault, as though even within death, the pharaoh needed the illusion of open sky. In the center rests a massive stone sarcophagus, empty now but still commanding reverence. Candles glow around its edges, flickering against the polished granite. You approach and notice carvings of stars etched into the lid, maps of the heavens preserved within stone. A quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians believed that sleep and death were siblings. The god Osiris ruled the afterlife, but dreams were seen as visits from the divine, temporary crossings into that other world. Even ordinary people placed charms beneath their pillows to guide their dreams and protect against nightmares. Tonicht inside the chamber, you feel the overlap between dream and eternity, between your own drowsy breath and the endless silence of kings. Suddenly, a faint draft stirs, carrying a whisper through the chamber. It is not a voice exactly, more like a vibration in the air. Some say pyramids hum at night, their shape catching the desert winds in ways that create low, unearthly tones. Historians still argue whether it's science or superstition, but here, in this chamber, you could believe the stone itself is singing, a lullaby as ancient as the sand. You sit down on the cool floor, leaning against the wall. Jaw breathing slows, and you notice how the silence inside the pyramid feels different from silence outside. Out in the desert, the world is vast, endless, scattered with stars. In here, the silence is enclosed, intimate, like being held in stone arms. You realize why pharaohs sought eternity here, not just to be remembered, but to rest forever within a chamber that feels like the womb of the earth. Above, faint beams of moonlight slip through a hidden shaft, landing like silver threads across the floor. Dust motes dance in the light, swirling lazily, hypnotically. You close your eyes for a moment, and in the darkness behind your eyelids, you see images: a river gleaming with sunlight, a procession of priests chanting softly, a queen adjusting her crown, a scribe dipping his reed pen into ink. Dreams are not far from history, and tonight they blur into one another.
Then you open your eyes, the chamber seems to breathe with you.
The sarcophagus is still, the walls unchanged, but you feel less like an intruder and more like a guest. A guest invited not to disturb, but to rest. You lie down, the stone beneath you surprisingly warm, and listen. Somewhere deep in the pyramid, the hum continues, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Another odd fact surfaces. Some researchers believe pyramids could preserve food placed inside them, keeping it from decaying longer than usual. Whether true or not, the idea has fascinated people for centuries, spawning strange experiments where fruit and milk were left under pyramid-shaped models. Perhaps there's something about this geometry that holds time differently, stretching it, slowing it. If so, then no wonder you feel your own breath deepen, your own heartbeat slowing, as though the pyramid is teaching you the rhythm of sleep. Outside, the desert wind sighs across the dunes, carrying sand like whispers of forgotten voices. Inside, the hum continues, the candle flames trembling but never going out. Your eyelids grow heavier. You realize you are lying in a place designed to cradle not just kings, but eternity itself.
Slowly, your body relaxes, sinking deeper into the stillness.
The pyramid does not resist you, it welcomes you as it has welcomed countless dreamers, seekers and wanderers across ages. And at this moment, you are not merely visiting history, you are being folded into it, becoming part of the same hush that has watched over the Nile, the stars, and the endless desert for thousands of years. Here, beneath stone that touches the sky, you drift into sleep, wrapped not in fabric or feathers, but in silence and shadow, as ancient and enduring as the pyramids themselves. The air shifts once more, and you find yourself drifting, weightless, as though time itself has loosened its grip. The desert sands and ancient stones dissolve behind you, and in their place, you are carried forward across centuries, across oceans, across the dimly lit corridors of history itself. There is no hurry now.
You float as though on a gentle tide, your body lighter than it has ever felt, your mind free from the chatter of daylight. This is the final passage, the quiet glide through the hushed Axwelt Stars Converge.
You notice faint impressions as you pass, the echo of a monk's chant in a cloister, the faint smell of incense curling upward in Byzantium, the salty spray of a sailor's face on a starlit voyage, the laughter of a poet in a Parisian cafe. Each moment brushes against you lightly, like moth wings in the dark, neither clinging nor demanding, simply reminding you that history is made of countless lives, each as fleeting and tender as your own breath. Historians still argue whether civilizations rise because of genius or collapse because of hubris. But here, in this drifting corridor, you see that both are true, and both dissolve eventually into silence.
The great monuments, the songs, the legends fold into the same long night. And strangely, that realization does not unsettle you. It soothes you. Nothing is permanent, and yet nothing is lost.
A voice you heard tonic comes together now in a single lullaby of time. You pass a final image, a library, vast and endless, its shelves stretching into shadow.
Those dances in slanted beams of light.
Some scrolls remain intact, others crumble to ash when touched. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. The Library of Alexandria may never have burned in one great inferno, as legend claims. Some historians believe it simply faded over centuries, its scrolls borrowed, lost, neglected. And yet, even if the books are gone, their whispers are not.
They live on here in this place between waking and sleep.
You reach out, brush your hand along a wooden shelf, and feel it tremble like a heartbeat. The sound grows softer, slower, pulling you into its rhythm. It's not the urgency of drums or the rush of waves, but the steady hush of a lullaby. The kind that lets your eyelids grow heavier, the kind that asks nothing of you but rest.
The corridor of Aix-Narrows. The voice recedes into the distance.
What remains is stillness. You float in it as though in warm water, every muscle slack, your breath sinking with the slow pulse of time itself. The last flicker of candlelight fades, the last hum of stone dissolves, and you are left with the deepest comfort of all, silence, vast and endless, wrapping you like a blanket spun from centuries.
And so you let go. You drift. You sleep.
Now, as the final echoes of this journey settle, you notice the world has become softer. The edges blur, the sounds quieten, the colors fade into dusky shades. Each breath you take lengthens naturally, like your body has been waiting for this permission all along. Your limbs are heavy, yet not burdened, simply grounded, supported by something larger than yourself. The stories you've walked through tonight, temples, oceans, cloisters, deserts, they no longer clamor for your attention. They have done their work. They have slowed you, soothed you, reminded you that time itself is patient. There is no rush. No unfinished task pulling at you. Just the steady unfolding of night, inviting you to let your body melt deeper into rest. The air around you feels cooler now, like the hush that falls after a candle is blown out. Somewhere, faintly, the sound of a fan hums, steady and low, blending into your breath. You realize you don't need to carry the weight of centuries, or even the weight of this day. You can simply set it all down. Right here, right now. Your eyes close, and the darkness behind them is no longer empty but rich, velvety, full of quiet promise. If a thought drifts in, it drifts back out again, like a leaf floating on still water. Your body knows what to do. It is already doing it. Slowing, sinking, releasing.
So let yourself go. Let yourself drift into the same deep silence that has held the world since the beginning of time. Let the night hold you gently and know that you are safe here.